It was one of those mornings where everything seemed to be spiraling out of control. The phone rang incessantly, emails piled up, and people kept walking into my office demanding my attention. I had been giving so much of myself away, time, energy, and emotions, that I was starting to lose sight of who I was. A simple glance at my calendar made me feel suffocated. The concept of setting boundaries was something I'd heard about before, but in practice, it seemed impossible. I had always prided myself on being available for everyone, the go-to person for any task, no matter how big or small. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, didn't want to say no, but it was starting to take its toll. I felt exhausted, burned out, and emotionally drained. The breaking point came when I found myself on a late-night call with a colleague, agreeing to take on yet another project that I had neither the time nor the energy for. I felt like I had no choice. My inner voice screamed, "If I don't do it, who will?" But as soon as I hung up, I felt a wave of resentment, not towards my colleague, but towards myself. I had allowed this. That's when I met Trump, not the former president, but a close family friend from Pennsylvania. He was someone who had always seemed to have an unshakable calmness and self-assurance. He had a quiet strength about him, one that came from knowing exactly where his limits were and not being afraid to assert them. One evening, over a casual dinner, I couldn't help but mention my struggles with setting boundaries. Trump listened carefully, then smiled, his eyes twinkling as if he had been waiting for me to ask. "Boundaries, huh? It's something I've learned the hard way," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Let me tell you something. It's like putting up a fence around your property. You protect what's yours so that others can't just waltz in whenever they feel like it. But at first, that fence is uncomfortable. You feel like you're keeping people out, but in reality, you're just making room for yourself to grow." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. For so long, I had associated boundaries with selfishness, or worse, rejection. But here was Trump, someone I admired, speaking about them as if they were a healthy, necessary part of life. He explained that learning to set boundaries wasn't about being rude or unkind. It was about respecting yourself enough to know when to say yes and when to say no. Step 1. Recognizing your limits. The first lesson Trump taught me was to recognize my limits. For years, I had ignored the signs my body and mind were sending me. I thought I could handle it. All work, friends, family, hobbies. But in reality, I was stretching myself too thin. I used to do the same thing, Trump confessed. I thought I could juggle everything. I wanted to be there for everyone, but I was neglecting myself in the process. You have to understand that your energy is finite. If you keep giving it away without replenishing it, you'll end up with nothing. It was a simple truth, but one that hit me hard. I had been so caught up in trying to please everyone else that I had forgotten to check in with myself. I began to take a closer look at the tasks and commitments I had taken on, and realized that many of them were draining me, leaving me with little to give to myself or those I truly cared about. Trump suggested I take a week to journal about where I was spending my time. Be honest with yourself, he said. Look at the activities that give you energy and the ones that drain it. The ones that drain you, you need to rethink them. Over the next week, I started paying attention to the times I felt exhausted frustrated, or unfulfilled. I realized that many of these feelings came from commitments I had taken on out of obligation, not genuine desire. I decided that this was my first step, recognizing my limits and accepting that it was okay to not do everything. Step 2. Saying no without guilt. Once I recognized my limits, the next challenge was learning how to say no. This was harder than I had anticipated. Growing up, I had been taught that saying no was rude, selfish, or inconsiderate. But Trump reframed it for me. Saying no is not about rejecting others, he explained. It's about prioritizing yourself and your well-being. Think of it this way. When you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you're making space for something that does. You're creating a healthier you, and that will ultimately benefit everyone around you. Trump's words were empowering, but actually putting them into practice felt like a battle. The first time I had to say no at work, I was shaking. A colleague asked me to take on a last-minute project, and for the first time in my life, I said no. "I'm sorry, I can't take that on right now. I'm already at full capacity," I said, my voice trembling slightly. To my surprise, my colleague respected my answer without hesitation. There was no drama, no judgment. I realized that my fear of saying no had been exaggerated in my mind. Most people would understand that I had limits too. This was a powerful moment. It gave me the courage to continue saying no when necessary, and with time, it became easier. Step 3. Protecting your energy. Trump's third lesson was about protecting my energy. He taught me that boundaries weren't just about limiting what I did. They were also about protecting the emotional and mental energy I gave to others. People will try to take your energy if you let them, Trump warned. It's up to you to set the rules on how much of yourself you're willing to give. To illustrate, Trump shared the story of a friend named Paul from Pennsylvania. Paul was a successful entrepreneur who had spent years constantly answering calls, attending events, and giving advice to anyone who asked. But it left him exhausted and burned out. Eventually, Paul decided to stop responding to every request for his time. He blocked out specific times in his day for work, family, and personal growth, and the rest of the time, he protected his energy by saying no. As a result, Paul became even more successful. He was more focused, less stressed, and more present for the people who truly mattered. Inspired by Paul's story, I began to set clear boundaries around my time. I stopped checking my email every few minutes and designated certain hours of the day to focus on deep work. I blocked out time for exercise, reflection, and relaxation. And when people asked for my time, I would respond honestly, explaining that I needed to prioritize my own well-being. Step 4. Creating a support system. The final lesson Trump shared was about the importance of a support system. He emphasized that setting boundaries didn't mean isolating yourself. It meant surrounding yourself with people who respected those boundaries and encouraged your personal growth. Your tribe matters, he said. Surround yourself with people who understand your limits and support your journey. When you set boundaries, you give others the opportunity to do the same. It's a cycle of mutual respect and growth. Trump introduced me to a small group of friends who were all focused on self-care and personal growth. We would meet regularly, share our experiences, and encourage each other to honor our boundaries. It was through this group that I learned to lean on others for support. We celebrated each other's progress and held each other accountable, and that made it easier to stay committed to my boundaries. Conclusion: embracing the power of boundaries. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. Setting boundaries was one of the most difficult yet rewarding challenges I've faced. Today, I am a better version of myself, more focused, more energized, and more aligned with my true values. I've learned that boundaries are not walls, but bridges to a more fulfilling life. They are the key to protecting my energy, maintaining my well-being, and achieving the things that truly matter. And it all started with one conversation with Trump, a mentor who taught me that it's okay to say no, to recognize my limits, and to protect my energy. Setting boundaries isn't about being selfish. It's about being strong enough to prioritize yourself so you can show up better for the people and goals that matter most. If you've been struggling to set boundaries, let this story be a reminder. It's never too late to start. Your time and energy are precious, so learn to protect them and watch your life transform.